When we think of the great ancient superpowers, our minds usually jump straight to Rome or maybe Greece. But what if I told you there was another empire, one that came before them, an empire that was bigger, more diverse, and in a lot of ways, way more forward-thinking? Well, today we're diving into the incredible story of ancient Persia, a true giant of history that literally shaped the world we live in.
So, to get us started, I've got a question for you. Just think about it for a sec. Where do you think the world's first charter of human rights came from? Was it ancient Greece, the Roman Republic, maybe some enlightened king in medieval Europe?
Nope. The answer, which is pretty mind-blowing, is that it came from the ancient Persian Empire. Yeah, we're talking over 2,500 years ago, and these guys were already thinking about concepts like freedom and tolerance on a massive scale. And that one fact, well, it tells you just about everything you need to know about why this empire was so incredibly different. And the man behind this radical new idea was the founder of the whole thing, the Persian Achaemenid Empire. His name was Cyrus the Great, and let me tell you, he was not your typical ancient conqueror just looking for power. He had a completely different vision for what an empire could be.
Now don't get me wrong, this guy was an absolute genius on the battlefield. Starting around the middle of the 6th century BCE, he just exploded onto the scene. First, he united all the Persian tribes. Then, in what felt like the blink of an eye, he conquered 3 of the biggest powers around: the Medes, the Lydians, and the Neo-Babylonian Empire. He created the largest empire the world had ever seen up to that point.
But here's the kicker. What really truly made Cyrus special wasn't what he did during the battle, but what he did after. And we know this because of an incredible little artifact called the Cyrus cylinder. It's this clay cylinder with writing all over it that basically lays out his revolutionary philosophy for how to rule.
And the idea at its core was so simple, but so radical for its time. Instead of crushing the people he conquered and enslaving them, he did the opposite. He freed them. He let displaced people like the Jews exiled in Babylon go back to their homes. He respected their gods and their customs. This was an empire built not just on raw power, but on a foundation of tolerance. It was a total game changer.
So, Cyrus builds this massive, sprawling, super diverse empire. But that creates a huge new problem. How do you actually run this thing? How do you manage a territory that stretches for thousands of miles with dozens of different cultures? Well, that challenge fell to his successor, Darius the Great, who came up with a brilliant system to hold it all together.
Darius basically engineered the empire's operating system. It was genius. First, he broke the whole territory up into manageable provinces, which they called satrapies. Then he put a local governor, a satrap, in charge of each one. But, and this is the clever part, to make sure nobody got any funny ideas, he had special inspectors, known as the king's eyes and ears, who would travel around and check up on them. This system was so good it became the blueprint for empires for hundreds of years. Okay, but for a system like that to work, you need fast, reliable communication. Which brings us to this number, 2,700 kilometers. Any guesses what that could possibly be in the ancient world?
That was the length of the Royal Road. And this wasn't just some dirt path. This was an ancient superhighway. Darius built this incredible road network with stations all along it so that royal messengers could swap out for fresh horses and just keep going. A message that used to take months to deliver could now cross the entire empire in just a matter of days. It was the internet of its day, the information backbone that held the whole state together. But, it was almost inevitable. This gigantic, organized powerhouse of an empire eventually slammed right into a collection of small, scrappy, and fiercely independent states on its western edge. We're talking, of course, about the Greeks. And this collision would set the stage for one of the most famous conflicts in all of history. I mean, you really couldn't have picked 2 more different opponents. On one side, you've got Persia, this vast, centralized superpower, led by a king with absolute authority, commanding a massive army drawn from all corners of the empire. And on the other side, the Greeks, a messy collection of tiny city-states, trying out these new ideas like democracy, defended by small armies of citizens who were fighting for their own homes.
This epic showdown gave us battles that are still legendary today. You've got the Battle of Marathon, where a smaller Athenian force managed to defeat a huge Persian invasion. And then, of course, there's Thermopylae and the legendary last stand of the 300 Spartans. In the end, even though Persia seemed unstoppable, the sheer resilience of the Greeks was enough to keep their independence. Eventually, the Achaemenid dynasty did come to an end. About a century and a half later, a new force rose up in the west, the Macedonians, led by Alexander the Great, and he swept through and conquered the Persian Empire. But this wasn't really an ending, it was more of a transformation. The fall of Persia led to this amazing fusion of Greek and Persian culture that would go on to shape the entire world for centuries to come.
Because that's the thing about Persia. Even after the empire itself was gone, its ideas, they just kept going. The political power might have vanished, but its cultural and philosophical influence just continued to echo down through the ages. And at the very heart of Persian culture was their unique religion, Zoroastrianism. This was one of the world's first true monotheistic faiths, and it brought some huge ideas to the table that might sound kind of familiar, like the idea of a cosmic battle between a single good god and a powerful evil force, or the idea that humans have free will to make moral choices between right and wrong.
Now think about that for a second. These core Zoroastrian concepts, good versus evil, a final judgment day, the ideas of heaven and hell, they would go on to have a profound influence on the development of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. The moral DNA of so many of the world's major religions has roots that trace right back here to ancient Persia.
And it wasn't just religion. Persia basically left behind a practical blueprint for how to run a massive, multicultural world. Their system of a central government with regional governors, their official postal system, their policy of respecting local cultures instead of stamping them out, their amazing blend of artistic styles, all these things became the standard playbook for pretty much every great empire that came after them.
So, that leaves us with one last big thought to chew on. When you look at everything from our ideas of human rights, to how governments are structured, even to the moral codes of our biggest religions, Persia's legacy is absolutely everywhere. It's just hiding in plain sight. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? Just how much of our modern world was actually built on a Persian blueprint.